Good morning and welcome to our session on securing IoT for the post-quantum era. Is that our session? Yes, a domain name registry perspective. My name is Wouter Natris van der Borgt, and I'm the coordinator of a dynamic coalition here at the IGF called Internet Standards Security and Safety. And with me are people from the coalition and from AFNIC. And together we'll be presenting the report that we're putting out here at the IGF. But first, a very short word about what IS3C, the Dynamic Coalition, is. We have one overarching goal, and that goal is to have long-existing security-related internet standards deployed by industry. And we have been producing reports over the past 5 years since we exist. And the first one was on education and skills, and trying to close the skills gap between what tertiary cybersecurity curricula offer and what the industry actually demands. And we identified an age gap and a skills gap and a gender gap all in one, all over the world. The second report was on IoT security, and that will come back a little in Joao's presentation, so I'll not go into that further. Our third report was on government procurement. We found out that governments mostly do not procure their ICTs secure by design, so it's not in their procurement perspective. So that is something that really needs to change if you want to have an incentive for industry to actually start producing secure by design products, whether services or devices or applications, etc. Then we produced two tools. We identified with a global forum of experts what are the most important internet standards to deploy on interconnectivity, and we added websites because everybody thought that was extremely important to put a point of pressure on for industry as well. Then we produced a toolkit on arguments. What arguments do technicians need to use to convince their CEOs, their CFOs, their board directors, etc., to actually either deploy standards or procure standards secure by design. And this year we have our fourth report, which the people here on the table will tell you about post-quantum encryption. The way that I look at it, the history of cybersecurity is, imagine that you buy a car on the top of a mountain and the salesman gives the keys to you and says, just drive down, there you go. And you go around the first very soft bend because it's starting to slow down very slowly, and there's a guy saying, do you want to buy brake lights? Waving on the side of the road, and by the next bend somebody is waving, would you like to have whatever, seat belts? And then finally, do you need brakes? Do you need brakes? And there's the first hairpin tail and the ravine going down like this. And this is what sort of happens with ICT. You buy a device and then somebody says you have to install this, or you have to buy antivirus, or you have to whatever. And that is something which is not normal for any other product in the world. Everything comes with sort of design for security. So I think that is what we are trying to prevent with this report. If Quantum Day comes and we don't have security in place, then there may be havoc. And if that happens, like the Millennium Bug or not, that the future will tell. But we think that it does. And with me are the people who are going to explain why this is important. We have from AFNIC Benoit, we have Sandosh, we have Joao from IS3C and online Elif. And then we have a photo moment with the report, and then we close the session with potential actions. So first, let me give the word to you, Benoit, to explain why this topic was important for AFNIC to take on and do the work with us.
Thank you, Wout. I'm Benoit Ampo, Director of Partnerships and Innovation at AFNIC, and we are very happy supporting this fourth report, and I will explain why and give you some elements of context on why AFNIC, the French Internet Registry, is very pleased with the outcomes from this report. At AFNIC, we have been working for over 15 years on the Internet of Things, particularly on the technical aspects and the identification of objects, as well on security and privacy issues through several R&D projects. More recently, like many technical organizations, we need anticipating the technical transition. We have begun to evaluate the impact of post-quantum cryptography on more operational aspects. As early as 2016, we organized a conference with our scientific council to raise awareness about its impact on our increasingly digitalized societies. Since then, many things have evolved. As part of our commitment to R&D, we also have observed that there are still too few studies on the social and societal impact of technologies. This is also a shift for us. We are trying to integrate, when relevant, these important dimensions into some of our studies, which makes sense, particularly here at the IGF, the unique place where all stakeholders can dialogue. This report was born from all these contextual elements. Quantum computing is no longer a distant dream, confined to the page of science fiction. In a way, it's still distant, since we do not know when the threat will be available and ready to crack the global cryptographic scene on our digital services. It is a rapidly evolving field with some significant investment from both the public and private sectors. While quantum computing promises revolutionary advancements, it also poses a substantial threat to our current cryptographic systems. The algorithms that secure our digital communications today could be rendered obsolete by the computational power of quantum computers. It's particularly acute for IoT devices, which are increasingly integrated into our daily lives and critical infrastructure. Ensuring the security and privacy for the long term is crucial. This report that will be presented by the Internet Standard Security and Safety Coalitions has been also submitted to the community for comments. So I'm very grateful to the authors and contributors of these reports. I think it's offering a comprehensive analysis of existing vulnerabilities, an assessment of political and regulatory frameworks, and last but not least, strategic recommendations to enhance security at national, local, and also global levels. In conclusion, even though the quantum computer capable of breaking current cryptography does not yet exist, the complexity of the transition necessitates immediate awareness and also action plans. Adapting infrastructure, revising trust chains, updating software, testing interoperability, this is not just about activating an option or replacing a few lines of codes or having some brake lights for your car, for instance. These are slow, sometimes costly evolutions that require coordination among many actors and rigorous planning. Past experiences in technological transition or the deployment of internet security extensions shows how these changes, even consensus-driven, can extend even more than a decade. We must collectively anticipate an inevitable transition. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think you set the stage, Benoit, ideally for the next step. But why is it important for a registry that .afnik is for the .fr region? So please, Santosh.
Thank you, Wout. My name is Santosh Balakrishnan, Head of R&D Partnerships at AFNIC. So thank you, Benoit, for setting up the stage for my talk. In the next 5 minutes, I will try to explain why a domain name registry is involved in the study about IoT and post-quantum. So here, if you see in the image here, we have different stakeholders involved in connecting a domain name to the web service or sending a mail to different users. So if you see from a technical perspective, we have IETF, which standardizes the IP addresses and the domain names. From a governance perspective, we have, for example, in the domain name sector, we have ICANN, we have CCTLDs like .fr. In the IP address governance, we have IANA, regional internet registries. For example, in Europe, it is called RIPE, Réseau IP European. So all these different stakeholders are involved in setting up the stage for translating the domain name to IP address. And the system that is used behind it is called the domain name system. But when we see in IoT, we have different stakeholders involved also, but they are working in silos. So what AFNIC is trying to look at it is that the multi-stakeholder system that has been working quite effectively in the internet for the last 40 years, can it be applied in the IoT? So that's what we are working on, and we are not just telling it, we are walking the talk. We had, for example, worked with different stakeholders on French government and the European projects. For example, we started with the supply chain industry in the consumer goods to look at how RFID or barcode could be used in the DNS and then resolved to its service. Then we work with the LoRa Alliance, which is the LPWAN technology. So we started like in Legos. We started first with seeing whether the identifiers can be added to the DNS database. Then these identifiers like RFID and barcodes could be resolved to service using the DNS. Then we added the next layers like security and privacy. So we had considerable experience in the last 15 years working with IoT stakeholders on how to use DNS. So the IS3C report here, that's the objective of this talk, looks at today's pain points in the IoT and how it is amplified by the advent of post-quantum. This report looks at it in detail, which will be explained by Yoav and Elif. So from a policy and standards landscape, what happens in the US, for example, NIST has published different algorithms, like 4 or 5 algorithms for post-quantum cryptography. The federal government is saying that by 2035, all federal systems classified and unclassified must be using full quantum-resistant cryptography. For example, in the EU, we have different standardization activities going around PQC. The EU roadmap also says that by 2035, transition should be largely complete for all practical systems. From a domain name perspective, if you see at the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, there is also ongoing work on how the DNS system could be getting ready for a quantum secure future. So our role as a registry, what are we going to do? We want to look at the technical and policy perspective on how to transition PQC-ready DNS infrastructure for real-world use. Let's say, for example, with PQC, we have cryptographic key sizes, which can be large, and there is also energy consumption. Then finally, our objective as a registry is to keep the DNS trustworthy for IoT. Our call for action is that as multi-stakeholders, let's work together to ensure that when the deadline arrives, like in the 2035, the IoT can resolve using DNS. The algorithms used for securing access could be quantum resistant. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh. I think that shows that it is an urgent topic. And we focused on IoT, which is the clicker. We focus on IoT because we had to limit our research, of course, but this could be on many different topics. The DNS will have its own problems, the banking system will have their own problems, the routing system on the internet will have their problems. But we faced the IoT challenge, and Joao is going to go into that. And then Elif will come up with the post-quantum part of the report. But Joao, the first is yours. Why is it so important on IoT to have this fixed, and what are the challenges we're facing already today? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. So in this part of the report, we did a literature review to understand the emblematic IoT security incidents, because we wanted to understand how we can, what's happening to be tackled. Then we started to look after the emblematic incidents to see the reach of these attacks and how they affected the public. And well, later we started to investigate and evaluate the policy frameworks and global standards that are active today. And with this, we discussed and thought about how to assess the readiness for post-quantum cryptography, because here it's not a question whether we are prepared or not, but how can we prepare? So to this, we create, in the end of the report, a proposal to actionable and inclusive mitigation, including mitigation strategies, since we know the internet is made out of billions of devices, and a huge part of them will not be able to be patched. So to start looking over the threat landscape, we need to look into the IoT devices and see what are they. So they are resource-constrained devices, which is our first challenge, since post-quantum cryptography is way more complex and way more a resource-intensive technology to be used. And we also are here using devices with fragmented protocols. So we have the devices with LoRa that uses a bandwidth different and, well, a protocol different than the IP protocol that we are all used to. So how can we go after it? How can we protect these other devices that talk in different languages? So it makes us feel like in the 70s when we had a couple of devices talking different languages, but we need to harmonize them to protect all the ecosystem, not just a part of the ecosystem, against the quantum threats. So, and of course, the other part of the landscape that we have is the low user awareness. So we have a inertia in patching these systems, because most of people even don't, it's difficult actually to look after all your devices that you have in your home or in your factory or in your company, because they are intended to be automated. They're intended to be devices that you are going to drop in the system, and you will never think again of this individual device. So how can we highlight that we have these entry points, that we have these devices, they are a risk, and use this to protect? So the case studies, I brought 3 here. One is the Jeep Cherokee hack. Well, it happened in 2015. They were able to change the steering wheel of the device and also interfere with the braking system. So this was a huge turning point, because online hack would be able to cause immediate harm to the user. So you can think like, okay, it was in 2015, so now we are better. Well, no, in 2024, Kia had also an incident that you could change the device owner, and with this be able to unlock the car and also see the history of the car. So anyone with a Kia car could be hacked in this way and have its privacy violated. So the St. Jude cardiac implants show that it's not only restricted to a specific industry. You can talk about medical devices too that can risk the life of the patients. So these cardiac implants had a flaw that could be, so the device could be discharged remotely and then making it unusable to the patient. And one thing that we saw very concerning is about the botnets. So I will go further on this. The Mirai botnet is the one most prominent because it was created in 2016, and it was actually a proof of concept. So a couple of guys in the college said, I think this kind of attack is feasible, so we will write some code and publish on the internet showing how we are vulnerable. Well, this actually created a trend based in their code. There are more than 30 active variants of this malware running around, and they have a huge impact in the privacy of the users and also to cause harm. So we saw other examples being used by espionage, and we need to look after this kind of threat that it's global. So the policy landscape we went through, it's pretty interesting. So we have ISO, and they are based in very foundational. They're based on foundational knowledge about how we can secure these devices. We have the EU Cyber Resilience Act, which mandates the security by design, including in IoT. We have the NIST. The APEC labeling systems are pretty interesting because they try to bring awareness to the user by validating and certificating the devices. And also, we looked up into the PQC part. We saw that UK created a roadmap to plan the transition up to 2035, which it looks promising, but we need to work on that too. And also, we saw the role of IGF in the PQC standardization because the main source of communication of these devices is the internet, and we need to have devices to tackle this, to tackle these communications. So, the strategic recommendations, we saw that we are coming in a good path, but we need to be further on it and create a mandate security by design universally, harmonize globally labeled certification, and invest in lightweight, post-quantum resistant solutions. And of course, train the users and the programmers to be able to use these kinds of technologies. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Joao. And I think the sort of risks are quite clear at this moment, also the recommendations. Sorry. And Elif, what are your findings in the research where the post-quantum part and the cryptography is concerned? So the floor is yours, Elif, and you have 9 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Wout. Just making sure that my slides are up as well. And of course, we are very happy to be presenting today the findings of our report. And you also see the full name, that it's socio-political and technical impacts of IoT and PQC. And in this report, already my colleagues mentioned that we will be focusing on also giving strategic guidelines. So for me, I think to complement what has been already said, let me just maybe jump to the PQC part with a bit more detail. So what we wanted to cover here with our co-authors was both giving the advice on the importance of the PQC migration, but as Wout briefly mentioned, we also wanted to make sure that it's on a concrete subject. And for this case, we will be referring to IoT also when it comes to our recommendations. So first, we wanted to understand what is the current status of the discussion on these issues. And when it comes to PQC, it's important to mention also for our audience that yes, we are talking about a threat by a quantum computer, and this particular quantum computer that we refer to is defined as a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. So it has a focus, it has the capacity, and it can be utilized for breaking the currently valid encryption, including RSA. And I don't have to explain why this is a significant threat, but I'm just going to picture for you one version of this threat that has been discussed a lot. This is called harvest now, decrypt later. And this is to say, even if when we are thinking that our highly sensitive data, such as government communications, are currently encrypted. This discussion, this particular risk, is highlighting that this encrypted data can be recorded right now, and those recordings can be decrypted once malicious actors are able to utilize a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. So that is just to give a concrete example on why we say this risk is a big one. And the other, of course, indicators to understand how this is a current and relevant risk is to look at the policy landscape. We are already seeing and analyzing in our report the actions by NIST. It was also briefly mentioned by my colleagues that they already have guidelines that is on which PQC algorithms are recommended, but also the fact that they set 2035 as a target for all federal systems to migrate to PQC encryption. So again, this can sound like a bit like away, right? Because we are talking about 2035, but it has been communicated also by NIST quite strongly that it is really, really important to start a migration process as early as possible so that we can really guarantee that we are going to be making sure that this data is really secure. So they gave the target as 2035, but then again, they said we have to start today all of the migration plans. Why am I highlighting this? Because maybe some of you saw in the news, maybe not, but EU just announced a few days ago that their ambitious target for all high-risk use cases that the PQC migration should be completed by 2030. So now we are already looking at a 5-year deadline, but let me make it a bit more pressuring by also explaining how they actually said that for achieving this timeline of making the switch by 2030, EU is now requiring the PQC transition planning and pilots to be initiated at least by the latest by the end of 2026. So if you walked into our lounge thinking that we will be talking about a sci-fi issue about the future, I guess that was wrong, right? We are launching today this report that is directly relevant to what needs to be done now and not later. So let me just stress that there are also other EU member states, including France, Germany, and the Netherlands, that already launched their PQC migration guidelines. So in our report, you will be also finding more explanations on this as well. And this was, again, mentioned by my colleagues very briefly. Our report also looks at the societal impact angle as well. So, for example, if we are talking about this like harvest now, decrypt later attacks, then we have to preserve the long-term privacy of the citizens as well against these kind of attacks. And we also have to secure critical services when it comes to societal impact. Also, when we are thinking about the legal impact, now that, for example, we are saying the PQZ migration plans must start latest by 2026, the regulations like the GDPR should be also compelling the use of quantum-resistant encryption in the near future. And when we look at the economic impact, of course, there will be significant costs for upgrading systems and hardware. That is also why we are urging for the migration plans to be started early. It has been mentioned again that we will be also covering in our report the environmental impact as well. I think Joao made a soft reference to it about how the algorithms can be also quite energy intensive, and for making sure that we are thinking about the environment, we will need to be working towards a lighter, possibly working very well algorithms as well. So now I will be just jumping into the recommendations. Again, it was already highlighted that this will be on different levels. So we will be giving recommendations in this report that are both on the national and organizational levels in detail, but we also made a call for global cooperation as well. And we have different levels of recommendations. Again, you will find all of this in our lengthy report that we are looking at, for example, some more timeline perspectives in more detail on how to handle PQC migration. And then we are also explaining in detail how organizations should tackle this. But another added value of our report is we got a chance to apply it to a particular case, particular study, which is on this IoT security. And for this, we also gave international level guidelines that is about global standardization, interoperability, that is focusing on international R&D as well as capacity building. And we are also very happy that we managed to give this very concrete national level recommendations as well, starting from government initiatives for awareness and R&D, continuing with making mandatory the PQC compliance, because again, now I think it's very clear that the risk, the threat is there. We know now better than, let's say, 20 years ago not to ignore cybersecurity requirements, right? So in that sense, we are also highlighting that there has to be already educational training programs as well, but also we need to be thinking from things like national synergies, things like supporting, for example, product developers in PQC, so that we are really covering a 360 aspect of this migration issue. Again, we said that we gave concrete guidelines also when it comes to IoT and PQC intersection. Here you can see in our report that we will be explaining how step by step a company and organization can also work towards or move towards the PQC migration, starting from a cryptographic asset inventory for their IoT systems to, of course, getting to, for example, the data privacy policies in line with that, as well as the supply chain engagement. So again, I already said that we are very happy to be launching this report. So I think that Wout also has a few printed out copies with him as well, but you can scan this QR code as well to download our report. And if you are interested in working with us, of course, our colleagues are on stage. If you want to learn more on our report, like I said, you are happily provided this free and publicly accessible link to download and benefit and cite this report in your future work as well. Thank you very much, Wout.
Thank you very much, Elif, and very much on time. I think that what Elif shows is that we have an option, and that option is to start acting now and be secure in the day of quantum. But the other thing is that we have a Dutch saying a donkey does not run into the same stone every time. So where cybersecurity is concerned, I think the world has proven not to be a donkey, because we've made the same mistake over and over and over with launching new products insecure by design. And this is the chance to do it differently. I think that with that, I open the floor for questions. Are there any online questions? No? It's a question in the room, because the experts are here. So who would like to ask a question? There are microphones. So Ernst and Mikey, please move to the microphone. And please introduce yourself and your affiliation first.
Does mic work? Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Ernst Norman. I'm the cyber ambassador for the Netherlands. I'm not a specialist on quantum computing, and really thank you for the presentation. I will read the report with interest. First of all, I was really happy that in the one of the presentation there was a reference to the Cyber Resilience Act, because Wout said it was especially important during procurement from the governments, but actually that's already too late. I mean, it should already be in the products anyway because of the Cyber Resilience Act. And I hope that many other countries outside the European Union will look at the legislation and also try to copy it, what's relevant for their own legislation, to ensure that it becomes a world standard to include cyber resilience in the products of the companies. For me, the risk in quantum and IoTs was a new angle. Really interested to learn about it. I discuss also quite often with specialists, professors from universities, the risk of post-quantum computing. And I must say there's also some different discussions. They say, you know, the organizations for which is really relevant, you know, the harvest, decrypt later, they are already aware of it and they're busy with it. So like the intelligence agencies. But if you look, for instance, to companies, small and medium-sized companies, individuals, data which is more than 5 years old is hardly relevant to steal and to put the energy in it to decrypt it. So they say, and encryption, or the whole development of new encryption is going on anyway all the time. So it's not a topic for the wider audience to be really concerned about, because, I mean, with the product development in place, it will in the end also reach them in a certain time through the products. I'm wondering what your view is on that. So, because you read a lot that it makes big as an enormous risk, and at the same time, you know, I speak to professors say, you know, we already have post-quantum encryption. Those organizations who really need it, they are already aware of it and they use it. Also, companies like ASML, for instance, they are truly aware of the need to secure their data. I'm curious about your view.
Okay, thank you, Ernst. And Mikey, we'll take your question and then we answer both at the same time.
Thank you. A very exciting and interesting session.
Please introduce yourself first.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Oh, introduce yourself.
I'm Maikki Sipinen, and thank you for this nice, interesting session. It's certainly an exciting topic, but also quite complex. And I can imagine that for citizens, it's not super easy to really grasp all the challenges here. And probably most of normal people living their everyday lives don't really think about it much, or even know that they are using RSA or other encryption systems. So I'm wondering, one of your recommendations was about this global labeling and certification. It was exactly to increase citizen trust. So it would be interesting to hear a tiny bit more what that could look like, and what would it be like in practice, since it sounds like something a bit challenging, because if you want to promote this kind of labels, you also are, I believe, promoting these challenges, like with this store now, decrypt later, which probably many citizens are not aware of yet. So how do you balance raising awareness and not just worrying people, or how to create trust without making it all way too complex? Thanks.
Thank you, Mikey. Thank you, Ernst, for your questions. Who would like to answer Ernst's question first, and then we go to Mikey's question? You take Ernst?
Yeah. Okay. So for the first one is like, is it a problem if with most of the devices? So yeah, I argue in this favor, because when we think of the cities that we are, the intelligent cities, it has embedded several IoT devices all over the around, and if these devices are not secure enough for the kind of challenges that we will face, we make our society as a whole vulnerable to these kinds of attacks. So if you've been able to fake the ownership of a specific device that it's crucial to the working of a transportation system, for example, it's been made by very tiny pieces, and if you break this chain, you can cause real harm. And about the labeling part, well, we already have labeling in cars. You can see like, oh, this car is rated safety A, this car is rated safety D. I believe people buy them knowing this. And for their restrictions, they are willing or not to take this risk, but it's good to take this decision informed. So I don't think it will cause some kind of make them afraid unnecessarily.
There's an example that I heard is about voting machines. Where's that data stored, and what happens with being able to see what somebody voted 20 years ago or 25 years ago when there's been a regime change? So, in other words, there are all sort of vulnerabilities that we need to consider that we're not even thinking of. It's not about ASML because they have money enough, but it's about the things that lie there for 20 years or 40 years and what happens with them. So it's far more complex, I think, than just the big companies or a big bank that will probably be able to deal with it. So that's the sort of thing we have in the back of our mind. We have time for one more answer. So who would like to? Yes, Santosh, Santosh?
If I could add to the question for the production and the research. So if you see, the PQC is already in the research, and it's just now the NIST or the other organizations are trying to quantify which are the algorithms production could use. So I would like to take just an analogy of what happened in the DNS. For example, people were saying that there are security vulnerabilities. So DNSSEC was a solution, but nobody was adopting that. But suddenly came the Kaminsky attack, and then there was a huge adoption. So I think in the quantum world also, things like that would help to easily add adoption.
And from, just to add also from the end user perspective and raise awareness, some countries are also thinking about developing like a cyber score label on products. So it could be also a way to directly give the information to the end users and consumers about the level of security enhanced by your product.
So thank you very much. 45 minutes are over before you know it, and they are almost over, so we're closing. I liken this topic to the millennium bug. Although everybody worked for nothing, it seemed, everybody was able to act at the same time, take the same measures that were agreed upon up front. I think that is something that we need to do with this topic, that the whole world starts acting, that nobody is left behind, that developing nations are assisted to set the steps they need to take, because if they're vulnerable, we're vulnerable. So I think that the IGF in 2026, I'm confident that will continue, would be an ideal place to bring this together. Because we have so many different stakeholders that will have to take their own actions, and they have to agree upon these actions. So what if we start later this year with an action plan, bringing important stakeholders together and start discussing what is the issue, what are the actions, what is the quantum, the cryptography that we agree upon, and start to make an action plan. And then it goes outside of the IGF, and from that moment on, hopefully everybody starts taking the same decisions. And Nico, you can have a very, very short comment, but please introduce yourself. We have 1 minute left, and then they switch us off. So please introduce yourself, but I would like to thank everybody first, and then we'll see how far we come. Thank you, guys. Thank you over there and the Norwegian organization, because you've been absolutely brilliant these days, and Lucien for reporting. Very, very brief.
Yeah, I'm Yuri Bokove from the Finnish Greens Party. I feel like the largest actor that is being under risk here is not the private companies, not the industry, not the ICT private operators, but the critical public infrastructure that is being quite harmed by austerity and the current
you've made your point, sorry, so that Nico can make his point. Sorry.
Yeah, very quickly. My name is Nico Cavallero. I'm the GAG chair at ICANN. I just wanted to know how many governments do you have at this point participating in the initiative, and how they can you hear me?
Zero, yeah, it's zero. That's your answer. So we want to bring them in as fast as possible.
Oh, all right.
I've heard you, Nico. Thank you.
You heard my question. I'm sorry.
So,
okay, because I wasn't listening. Sorry.
It's zero. So we want to bring them into the project next.
So they can still participate?
Yes, of course.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So we have 30 seconds. Lucien, in one sentence, what is the... The mic is there. There. Mic is there. In one sentence, what is the conclusion of this session?
Yeah, a few very good points, and I'll be brief. The first one, and I have two, is that it's quite important to keep in mind that other transitions like IPv6 or the adoption of DNSSEC took like 10 years. We need to be faster. And the second one, well, we launched this report on the IGF, which is a key multi-stakeholder fora. That's excellent and need forward thinking.
Okay, that was very brief, and thank you very much for this synopsis. I want to thank everybody again for showing up so early on the last day of and for your interest. Thank you again, everybody, and hope to see you at the next IGF.